Welcome back to Fantasy Football RPG, your go-to source for all things fantasy football. Join us for expert analysis, top strategies, and the latest insights to help you dominate your league. Let's level up your game and dive into the nitty-gritty. Without further ado, let's get the action.
Oh, dude, I was just Googling Dynasty fantasy football tips, and it keeps bringing me back to this channel. So I guess we should probably talk about that or something. You want to do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we can talk about some tips, maybe tip drills, how to run that on the sideline, how to catch those passes that are just those Hail Marys that just tip off a defender and you just catch them in the back of the end zone.
Have you seen the wild play? I think more defensive backs need to be doing this where it's like going out of bounds, they dive and they when you were playing, I don't know what you guys would call it. We played 50 where you would, you make a layup, it's 5 points. You make a 3-pointer, it's 10 points. But if you can put it back, it resets the person. So defenders are on the sideline and they would jump up and put it back into play and then another defender catches it. That's my favorite play in football right now.
I think my favorite's when the wide receiver's up in the air and you just spear him into the sideline. You're just yep. Okay, you're not coming down in bounds.
My favorite play is targeting.
Well, you got to do it, effectively here.
My favorite play is crime. Listen, today we're going to talk about Dynasty trade deadline tips when you're in the middle, you're competing, you're trying to rebuild. What are some of the things you should be looking for and how to determine, are you a contender or pretender? But first, we got some stuff to talk about.
And now it's time for news and notes.
Dak Prescott out for the year. Anything else you want to talk about?
It's sad. How do you feel about CD?
Dude, the ceiling goes down, the floor goes down, the whole offense is gross. I think this is part of my issue with Jake Ferguson's dynasty value is that he is so truly tied to when Dak plays, he's a top 12 option. If they don't keep him around or Dak gets hurt, he's not an important part of the offense. He's an important part of Dak Prescott's offense. So bad for CeeDee Lamb, bad for Jake Ferguson, good for America, probably.
America's team going down. Absolutely love to see it as the Eagles fan on this podcast. And Mike is a fellow Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. That's what we're going with. Just absolutely love seeing the Texas fans, all of the Cowboys fans down there in Texas, just squirming. They're just so unhappy with their season, so unhappy with their owner. It's just glorious.
I think this is actually forgive the way this is going to sound. This injury is good for the Dallas Cowboys. It's going to let them understand that they need a hard reset. They were 12-5 the last 3 years, and they were overperforming to reach 12-5. If you told me this roster went 9-8, 10-7, I'd start to believe you. But the fact that they kept hitting 12-5, getting the playoffs, and then just getting their pants pulled down in the first round of playoffs, this is going to let them hit that hard reset. And it's not like New Orleans where they've kicked the can so far down the road. If they had another medium successful year, they could start getting themselves into problems. I think now Jerry Jones, the light has turned on. McCarthy needs to leave. He needs a real GM. He needs to figure out interior help on the offensive line, interior help on the defensive line, a running back with a pulse, just a couple of things that we say that they don't matter. I know I'm on my soapbox right now, but they still matter a little bit. You just need to not completely ignore them and put in me and Evan at left and right guard.
Hey, I think we could get a couple holding calls against us. Maybe get away with a couple holding calls,
My brother in Christ. I don't think so, but let's talk about the main stuff people want to talk about. Let's talk about Dynasty trade deadlines.
All right, let's switch gears. Roll for initiative as we dive into this week's segment.
All right, so there's 3 buckets that I really want to talk about tonight. We'll start with our rebuilders. So you're at the trade deadline. You know you're not making the playoffs. You're maybe 2-8, 1-9. The writing is on the wall. Maybe you knew this going into the season. Maybe you just had a bunch of injuries that really derailed your season. Evan, what are some tips that you're looking for to give these guys? How do you feel about buying injured players, picks, selling vets, like what are some overarching guidance that you have for rebuilders?
Yeah, I love nothing more than trading for some injured guys right now on a rebuilder. I'm pretty sure I had a deal where just recently where I gave up Lamar. Okay, number one quarterback in all of fantasy. All right, we got 2 first-round picks this year, probably both playoff picks. We got JJ McCarthy, we got Rashid Shaheed, and we got Rashid Rice.
So you got 4 or 5 firsts and a second for Lamar Jackson.
Realistically, in value for Lamar. These are the type of things that you can have a chance to be able to go to that playoff roster that typically somebody going all in like that. And to be fair, this team was number 1 in points for already, had, just lost their quarterback in Dak, already had JJ McCarthy that was injured as well. Like we're talking a team that knew that their time was right now. We're talking about a team that desperately needed a QB2 because they don't have a QB3 anymore. So all of that combined, it creates a perfect storm. So I love going after injured players, especially players that I've seen produce at high levels that are getting discounted because they're injured. You know me, I also love picks, though. I love looking for the future. I love the flexibility that it has. And if we're talking a rebuilding team, you're probably not talking about a team that's already going to be ready to compete in 25. Having those injured players on your team, even if they come back slow next season, it only helps you for the 25 season the 25 season to be able to try and get another pick in that 26 draft to be able to really solidify that rebuild.
Yep. The thing that I love about buying picks, it's like Matthew McConaughey in that movie where he was still hanging around college. He's like, man, I keep getting older. Those girls are still the same age. Like I keep selling players. Those picks keep gaining value. So as you are worried about like value insulation, trying to figure out like, is this player going to be good? Like Jamison Williams' first round pick goes from being worth like almost the moon to almost nothing to almost the moon for the first 2 weeks to getting popped for pills of some variety. Like there's just a couple of different ways that a player can ride a roller coaster. Like a pick is just a steady curve until you make the pick, and then it becomes a roller coaster. So big fan. Other rebuilding tips you want to get, like look at your window. So if you are like, you had a couple of rough injuries, the roster is still pretty good. You think that you can just roll it back in 2025. Like don't blow the whole thing up. Don't sell all of your pieces. It's okay to hold on to a couple of guys, maybe lose a couple of spots in your rookie draft. But if you're ready to retool and reload for 2025, like don't hit the reset button. But if things are rough, if you are looking at your roster and you're starting Justice Hill and Tyjae Spears at running back, you were starting. I'm in a league like that. It was a gross orphan. If you're starting, Xavier Legette at wide receiver, Jalen Coker wide receiver, like a couple of guys that you're just, it's tough in these streets. Hey, Dad Bod. If you find yourself in one of those situations where it is discussing, make a goal year that you want to start competing for and make sure players fit to those timelines. So if that goal year, let's say you just realized your roster is despicable, you had these guys that you thought were going to be studs and all of a sudden the bottom has fallen out. Go say like, I'm going to compete in 2026. I'm going to compete in 2027. Don't go any later than that. That's too far. Then you're just donating money to the pot. But then like guys like Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Debo Samuel, maybe even like there's a couple of wide receivers, running backs that are not going to have value in the window that you're looking at. So then you can flip those guys for picks further down the road to help with that goal year rather than just sitting like, oh, I'm rebuilding. And then there's no strategy. There's no underlying goal statement. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, Mike's hit on it before. He likes future picks. I do value future picks slightly, mainly because just time value of money, basically looking at future picks as money. But I just don't get to use them right now. It's looking at a treasure trove that you can see in the distance, but you just can't get there yet. Yep. So absolutely love that. Mike, yeah, I'm with you. Figure out a window. Typically, I like to give myself a 2-year window. I don't like to go into that 3rd year looking into the future. So that's a little difficult for me. personally, and I'll do a reevaluation in the 2 years and see what we can do then. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Cool. We got a couple of good questions. First from JK, what's a good goal year for Rashid Shaheed and Justin Fields? I think that those are a couple of players that you shouldn't be building your goal year around, but they both fit into a 2025, 2026 age range, because you're going to know heading into next season, is Justin Fields in a situation where he will be a starting quarterback? I think that he will be, just looking around the league and looking at the 2025 class. Rashid Shaheed, the breakout was real. I think he's going to come back and be a valuable part of that offense. He's going to be the wide receiver 2 for the team and a top 48-ish guy. Does that feel about right?
I mean, I would hope that he's more than a top 48 guy. I mean, we've seen the spike weeks from him. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be the down weeks. He's a much better best ball target than he is in a lineup league. Yeah. Lineup league, you're definitely going to have to deal with volatility. But no, I think he should be solidified when he comes back fully healthy into a clear top 36, pushing top 30.
I think the issue that I have there is Derek Carr still the quarterback. Like, in order to get out of the cap, there's a real situation where they move off of him and roll out with some combination of Jay Kaner, Spencer Rattler, or a rookie that we don't feel great about. And then the other thing, like, they don't have enough cap room to bring in another receiver, but the Saints aren't known. Like, Mickey Loomis isn't known for being we'll say a smart guy. So he might just trade up and draft a receiver again because he's a goober. But also, I am legally obligated. His 15.1 catch games also speak to me. But what's really cool is when he gets the 30.3 catch games. Those are really fun. Here we have another question. Jamie, I want to help you out with this. I need to know where the first is. If the first is top 2, I'm open to it. But I still think it's the Marvin Harrison Jr. side. Like, we've seen, he is a pro. He's running some of the most difficult routes. There's a lot of opportunities for him to be the guy that we want him to be. Like, it's not always, not everybody is going to be Jamar Chase. Not everybody's going to be Justin Jefferson. It looks like the pick is going to be number 4. So thanks for clearing that up. I would stick with Marvin Harrison in this one. What do you think?
I think it's the fact that you're getting Worthy on top of it. I think you're diversifying your assets. Look, Worthy is pure. He's pure hopium at this point.
I was a very big Worthy pre-draft fan, and there's some things that you want to see from a rookie receiver. I think it's moved from hopium to copium.
Ooh, okay. So realistically, I still feel like you can trade and get off of Worthy 2nd and 3rd easily. Somebody would take that.
Or are you giving up Mark for the
safe.
number 4, 2 seconds, and a 3rd? I wouldn't.
Really? I mean, the way I'm looking at it is, if that's 104, then it's also 204. And then you tell me that I get another mid-second and another mid-third. You're telling me that I'm getting 4 assets for a premium asset, of which 1 is still going to be a potential premium asset. Looking at the class and knowing kind of what's there, thinking through all of that, I think we're on different sides here, Mike, because I still think 104, with the caveat of being able to use that second, either one of the seconds or even Worthy, to be able to move up if you really see a clear tier break come through the process. But I think there's going to be enough wide receivers in the process, definitely enough running backs for back end picks there. Quarterback, hopefully you don't need a quarterback, but if you're giving up Marvin Harrison Jr., you're probably looking to restock that wide receiver well. So I think we're on different sides here, Mike.
I think we're on different sides. I really like what Chris said. You're drafting a Marvin Harrison Jr. type guy. It's either going to be Tet, maybe it's going to be Emeka Egbuka, maybe it's going to be Luther Burden. Like, there's a couple of guys that, like, we could be excited about in the first round next year, but, like, the value makes sense, but it just seems like you're kicking the can down the road, and, like, there's no need to move off of him unless it's an overpay, and this doesn't feel like an overpay to me.
Sure, but the argument's also going to be in a rebuild. What are you trying to do? In a rebuild, you're trying to be able to get assets that can obtain a positive trend in value. So having multiple shots at that asset, Marv is pretty far up there already. Like realistically, how much vertical space does he have to move up in value?
You're right.
Six, 7 slots at wide receiver.
He could certainly go down. I get what you're saying, but let's not beat a dead drum with this one. So he'll have plenty of good picks. So would you get Noah Brown and Najee for a second and third? Yeah, no, do that right now, 100%. Najee is probably worth a second and a third on his own, and like Noah Brown is interesting. Is he interesting? He's alive. He's on a roster.
So what do you think about the injury situation, Mike, for Najee, and what do you think about the playoff schedule that everybody seems to talk about as a vaunted playoff schedule?
Yes, it is a gross playoff schedule. However, the Steelers have shown that here, I'll leave it up. Their mindset is just establish the hell out of the run and then let Russ throw moonballs. It's truly like they're playing Madden and they have 4 plays that they like to call. It's more nuanced than that, but like it's you're gonna run ISO, you're on outside zone, and then you're gonna throw a deep ball on one side or a deep ball on the other. That's like the whole playbook right now. Najee is getting the majority of touches. He gives you a safe floor because of the volume that he's getting there. So he's getting a couple of targets. He's getting plenty of carries. I don't know if he's going to
get Mixon for that second and third.
That's actually a good point. Before you click accept on that one, I would send the second and the third for Mixon, Kamara, Henry. Pick old running backs. Like those guys are outperforming Najee, so it's unlikely they respond. But the worst they say is no, and you can just move on.
Jacobs, how do you feel about Jacobs right now?
I'm going to eat a little bit of crow here. He's doing much better than I thought he would this season. My whole thesis for fading Josh Jacobs going to Green Bay was that they love to run a 2-back system. They have never given one back more than 250 touches. Josh Jacobs has never had less than 250 touches and been fantasy relevant. I didn't have on my bingo card that Marshawn Lloyd, A.J. Dillon, and the rest of the Green Bay Packers offense would end up at a hospital all at the same time. So I think I have Jacobs over Najee right now, but it's probably closer than people are willing to admit because Najee had such a gross couple of years before this season.
Okay.
You're just looking at me.
I am. I'm reading Chris's comment saying that he wouldn't trade his Apple stock for 5 penny stocks. A first-round pick isn't a penny stock. Like,
yeah, he's trading an Apple stock for a Disney stock and then 4 penny stocks.
In early second, it isn't. All right, whatever.
I'll take it to heart. Chris is a smart guy, and we love him dearly. Let's talk about.
He loves his pennies.
We've given plenty of rebuilding tips. Let's talk about that middle of the road team. So I'm going to jump on this first. If you are middle of the road, so we're talking somewhere between the 8 seed up to even the 4, maybe even 3 seed, I need you all to do me a favor. There's 2 things you can do. 1, look at your points for in your league and match that with the start sit accuracy that Sleeper gives you, which is amazing, by the way. If the start sit stinks and the points for are fine, that makes sense to me. You're probably competing. You're maybe a piece away. Go be a buyer. See if you can get a couple of like old crusty vets for cheap. Send those seconds away. The second and third round hit rate we talked about in our value of a dynasty pick, they're not that great. So go try and get a competitor and like push to the playoffs. On the flip side, if you're bad and you just happen to be winning by accident, that's happening to me in RPG Bards right now. My team is atrocious. I have like 11th points for, but I'm the 4 seed right now because I keep winning by accident. I'm trying to sell anybody that I can, but like it's hard in those streets. I only have 2 good players. I don't know how I'm winning, but you need to start selling off some of those vets that aren't going to help you make that goal year. Treat yourself as if you're a rebuilding team. Don't be the guy like the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers that sells the farm to get in the playoffs every year, then gets waxed in the first round. The other thing you can do if you don't want to go by points for, send it to a friend. Send it to me or Evan. Like, we love that stuff. Follow us up, like Twitter, Discord, whatever. Like, say, hey, is this a competing team? And we'll probably ask you for pictures of like the top couple of seeds, see where you're standing. But a lot of the times, like, you just need a second opinion. It's hard to be unbiased in this. Like, I send Evan teams all the time. I'm like, is this real? And normally he's like, no. And I'm like, that's fine.
Sometimes I say yes, though, Mike. And I said the same thing to you. And you're like, how did you get that team? Or you're like, you're absolutely crazy. This team sucks.
Yes, exactly. And that's why you need good friends. But hey, Taba, glad to have you, man. We're here to help. There's all sorts of things on the channel. So if you don't want to catch us live, like, head over, catch some of the replays. But you need Dynasty tips. That's what Evan and I live for. We also do redraft stuff just because it's fun. But what do you have for middle of the road teams, and how do you feel about like max points for or just points for and asking a buddy?
Yeah, no, definitely have friends that are in your corner, friends that you can trust. It comes at a great value, comes at a great cost too. You know, answering those 3 a.m. text messages from Mike, you know, saying, hey, I just got up middle of the night and got this trade offer, you know.
I need you to wake up right now.
Yeah, I need you to wake up and take your morning pee and get back to me here. So, yeah, you know, comes at a price. But middle of the road teams, you know, honestly, to me, any rebuilder is a points for with also a max points for that is 7 or below. So for me, middle of the road is that 6, that 5, that 4. Those teams that you're going to squeak into the back end of the playoffs. And those you really need to be careful on, because those are the teams that get your dynasties in absolute just deep water, because you go and you move future assets thinking that you're going to be able to compete now. You ultimately don't make the championship, so you're out of the money to be able to have the money to be able to rebuild properly. And then all of a sudden, now you're also into the league more because you paid your league dues like a good league mate for those future seasons that you traded away picks for. And now you have some assets that are on the back 9 of their career, maybe the back 3. All right. So we're talking guys that are established, guys that are hitting the end of their career. So definitely, definitely something that I have a little bit of concern with, a little bit of heartburn over. But once again, you know, we're really looking at these teams. We're saying, do I have some injured guys? Do I have a Pacheco as an example here that's coming back? Do I have a Christian McCaffrey that just came back this last week? You know, are those guys that are really going to be additions to my roster and make me better without having to trade future assets? Those are the kind of things. If I have somebody coming back that's making my team better, I'm going to be more inclined to push more chips in, because I know that I'm already taking that second, third step to be able to push really to get to that. And I'm able to fill roster holes. Yeah.
Being able to have players that you know when they come back, you can just plug them right back into your lineups. It's beautiful. When you have those players that they're coming back and you're like, I got to see it for a couple of weeks. And then after that, I still don't feel great about it. But like maybe like Javonte Williams for the last 800 games. Brother. But yeah, no. Great points. I think our definition of middle of the road is interesting to me. Like, I think that because there's the guys that are the 7 or the 8 seed, and they just think they had bad luck. Like, man, that stinks. I'm 4th in points for. But it's like, are you really winning a championship with that, or are you just hanging out? But
yeah, I mean, 4th in points for, Mike, that's not a championship caliber roster.
That's what I'm saying. So you got to really evaluate and figure out, are you 1 or 2 pieces away?
You may be a little bit of a crazy person, Mike. I just walk into work, and people see me walking into work just speak into the air. They probably think I'm some crazy homeless person with a badge, here in Nashville, just randomly blabbering about whatever. But no, I'm having conversations with myself, trying to talk myself into these teams and being like, is this really a competitor? Well, no, not really. I have too many guys that are injured, blah, blah, blah. So definitely have those conversations with yourself and then find a good friend.
Yeah. Or hit us up Twitter at FF Mike Cash with a K, and Evan is at FF RPG Pod. Talk about competing tips, and let's get out of here a little bit early, maybe get some sleep for once. That sounds pretty sweet. But all right, you are 1 or 2 seed, maybe even the 3 seed, or I'll even extend it to the 4 seed, but you have like the classic team, first points for, but also like first points against, and it's just tough in those streets. It happens. Been there. That's happening to me at RPG Shields right now. I have the first points for, but I'm like 4th place. Look, these are the teams. Scared money don't make money. I love talking about in a vacuum, like never send future first for good running backs. Like that makes for great clips. It makes for great advice. It's a good way to keep your team healthy. But also, if you add Derrick Henry to your team right now, you're probably winning the championship. If you add Alvin Kamara to your team, you're probably winning the championship. If you add insert old wide receiver here that you care about, which there's not really that many that are doing well right now. Like Diggs got hurt, Adams is struggling, but there's years past where there's old guys that are still doing great. That number 11 or 12 pick, the hit rate gets pretty low pretty quick. So maybe try to send those for guys that have more than a 1 or a 2 year window. See if you can package 25 first, 25 second, 25 third, maybe some of those young bench stashes with Hopium still tied to them, and go get yourself somebody that has a proven track record with a timeline for 2 or 3 years left on them. That's my preferred method, is to try and like send more. And I understand that it's probably an overpay, but it gives me somebody that I know is going to be on my roster for a couple more years. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, definitely willing to pay above market price if I need to for guys that are going to give me a 2-year window here. Because realistically, when I'm looking at a championship roster, I'm looking at it in this year's terms and I'm looking at it in next year's terms. Like everybody obviously wants the youngest players that are the best out there, blah, blah, blah. Welcome to Dynasty. All right. Everybody wants those guys. But when you're realistically looking at your team, trying to, Mike, while I'm talking here, going on my gallivant of thoughts, can you go over to our friends over at Fantasy Calc?
I'm there right now.
And tell me, can you get Terry McLaurin for a first-round pick at this point?
Ooh.
Or is he more expensive than a first-round pick?
Do you want to talk about our trade for Terry McLaurin?
When? A long time ago?
It was before the season started. I bought him from you for a second.
Yep, that you did. Good call, Mike. Good work.
Best quarterback he's ever played with. Check out the so right now, here's a couple of recent Terry McLaurin trades from our friends over at Fantasy Calc. Please check them out. They rule. What the hell? 1 quarterback, 2027 second round, and then 3rd, 4th, 7th. It's with IDP, I think. Terry and a second for Trey Benson, a 1st and a 3rd. Interesting. Let's see.
So 1st and a 3rd.
Terry straight up for a 1st.
Okay.
So it's his price tag is a 1st right now. There's one for Terry McLaurin and Calvin Ridley for Rashee Rice, which I think that's a perfect thing to bring us from the competing teams to the rebuilding teams. Rashee Rice is probably more valuable in a vacuum than either of those 2 players. He's not scoring any points right now. Calvin Ridley and Terry McLaurin each have a 2 to 3 year window on them at a relatively cheap price tag. Relatively, I know he just said Terry's worth a 1st, but like compared to Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, relatively cheap. Rashee Rice, when he comes back, if he moves right back into the role that he had, he's back to a top 12 dynasty wide receiver. The rebuilding team gets the better asset that's riskier later on. The other 2 guys, very valuable to this competing team right now. The wheels are coming off soon. So I love that move.
Yeah. Well, once again, finding those middle of the road teams that also are just saying it's time to pack it in. They're coming to that realization, saying, "Yeah, it's not my year."
Yep.
Those are the teams to try and jump on. Those are the teams to have hopefully been having that conversation with the last 2 weeks, saying like, "Hey, just checking in. Like, where are you at? How are you feeling about your team?" Like just trying to get a pulse on, hey, are you willing to just kind of pack it in? Do you want picks? Do you want young players?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want stars that lost their quarterbacks? Perfect segue to talk about CeeDee Lamb.
Yep.
All right, we already talked about him a little bit in the show. CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. These are quarterback. Jake Ferguson's quarterback dependent. CeeDee Lamb is quarterback improved. But when you're talking about a wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb still holds top 4, maybe top 5 if you're down a little bit because of the
Wide
injury.
receiver 5 on Dynasty calc right now.
Okay. So there you go. Still holds top 5 value. So when you're looking at guys like Terry McLaurin being able to drop down, you start thinking about somebody that can be a little bit older. Terry McLaurin, Jaden Reed, on top of something else for a CeeDee Lamb. You're getting points right now. You're getting guys that have a favorable schedule the rest of the season. You're getting guys that are younger that aren't going to drop in value, if at all, this offseason. You're getting the points now on top of it. CeeDee Lamb, I think if I'm remembering correctly, it's like 4 out of the last 19 games that he had without Dak. He's been a top 10 wide receiver. Yeah, just imagine starting CeeDee Lamb in the championship and he scores you 8 points. You're going to be pretty upset.
I would cry.
Yeah, it would be pretty rough. But competing teams, let's also remember that there is a prize at the end of this. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Typically in most leagues, it's about 70%, somewhere around there, 60 to 70% of the total pot. Some leagues may be higher, some leagues may be lower if they give weekly winner payouts or something like that. But that typically is going to give you enough time to be able to properly rebuild, even if you go in. So the whole goal of going in right now is looking at it saying, this season or next season, I think this is a legitimate team to be able to win a championship. If you can do that, now you just bought yourself 4 or 5 seasons and you're still breaking even.
Yeah. I love the idea of using your payout to buy the years that you plan to rebuild with. Like that makes sense to me. It also sounds like a fun way to do it. We have a very good question in the chat, and then I think we're going to close it for the night. If you guys have any more questions, hit us up. But so what wide receivers are worth chasing for a chip this and next year? With that, you can deal his entire draft. Has some aging running backs, but his wide receivers are Rashid Shaheed, Zay Flowers, and Cortland Sutton. I was looking at this while we were doing it. I have 3 names that I'd like to throw out to you, Evan. Darnell Mooney, currently valued somewhere around a second-round pick. Cedric Tillman, and Juwan Jennings. I think Juwan Jennings is the cheapest and most available for a run this year, but every game that he's playing without Brandon Ayuk, we're talking about owning the target share, fun to watch, in a good offense, touchdown upside, like all of the boxes that you want to check for a fantasy player, like he has them. And maybe Ayuk doesn't look like himself when he comes back. Maybe Jennings moves on somewhere else. Maybe Ricky Pearsall begins to like take over the role and they trade him away. He's only 27 years old. There's a chance for Jennings to have long-term value, and this year he's extremely valuable. Cedric Tillman, I'll let you talk about Cedric Tillman because you won that bet by a lot.
Yeah, Tillman is not a bad receiver. He's also not a 1 by any means. He really shouldn't be a 2 on an NFL team. You have a quarterback situation that's in absolute flux. You have no clue what you're doing in Cleveland there. Like, what's going to be the quarterback situation? Is Watson coming back? They have said that they're not saying that he's not coming back. So
Cam Ward.
Okay. Love that. if they're at the top of the draft, they really need help on that offensive line. I fully expect them to go offensive line and try and address wide receiver a little bit later. Because you look at the wide receiver crew, Elijah Moore, not getting it done. Jerry Jeudy, they're stuck with him. They paid him a lot of money for some unknown reason.
Very dumb.
So, yeah, Tillman, I loved Tillman back at Tennessee, but I do not think that Tillman is the type of play that is going to be viable continuing into next season any more than a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5.
But
like
this year,
I could see. Sure, this year he's cheap, but people are also just blowing him up right now because he's been doing well, because he's been producing, because people feel like they have found money, so they're just asking for seconds. So, are you going to be willing to throw a second out? I personally don't want to send a second for Cedric Tillman.
Back to our value of a dynasty pick. I would offer a second and ask for Tillman and a third back.
Sure. You're not getting that. Well, I shouldn't say not in a vacuum. I highly doubt that you're getting that done because I've sent that exact deal out in multiple leagues where I have Cedric Tillman and I'm saying, hey, I just want a second. I'll give you Tillman and a third. And it's gotten taken incredibly fast. And then I've done it on the flip side where I've tried to offer a second for Tillman and a third and it's gotten rejected incredibly fast.
Well, according to our friends,
but since you brought up Mooney, give me Mooney.
Mooney is he's the one.
Yeah.
Give me a 2.
Give me Mooney for a second over Tillman for a second in a vacuum, 100%. The way the offense runs, the way that the offense, the way that the staff is most likely to use their draft picks this year, it's not going to be on offense. Their wide receiver group is relatively solidified. Their running back group is solidified, period. Their quarterback room is solidified. Their offensive line is solid. Maybe they use some on the interior late round picks, but most of the picks I would bet, being a betting man, I would say most of the picks would be going to the defense this coming off season. And I would say most of the resources are going to be going to the defense this offseason.
Least sacks in the NFL, Atlanta Falcons. So it sounds like we agree on Mooney for this year, next year, and like maybe even a little bit longer. Like Mooney, good football player. Big fan of him. Tillman and Jennings. Jennings is a more locked and loaded role for this year. Tillman is maybe he's this year and next year. Maybe he's only a flash in the pan for those 3 weeks.
Can I bring up Josh Downs?
Dude, the Downs hype is real. Like you're gonna have to pay for Josh Downs,
but it's not a first yet.
It is a first. I've seen Downs for Olave with Olave adding to their side. The Downs hype is here. People have caught on. He's good at football.
All right, maybe I'm just slightly behind that train then.
Yeah,
because I've definitely been feeling like you can get him for a second and a third.
Offer a second and a third for Downs. If it doesn't get accepted, offer a second for Mooney. If it doesn't get accepted, offer a second for Tillman and a third back, or a second for Jennings and get a third back. Look at that. Actionable information. Be sure to like and subscribe.
What are we doing here? Oh, man.
Look at us go. But
tight end's a wasteland, Mike. Can we agree on that?
Tight end, I hope you have Brock Bowers.
Hey, don't forget about my man, Cade Otton. My snap king.
Well, it's been a fun show. Love you all dearly. Thank you very much for listening. Evan, we're not going to talk about tight ends. Listen, if you want to talk about tight ends, find us on Twitter at FFMikeCash with K, at FFRPGPod. Join our free Discord. Hang out with us. Comment on the YouTube videos. Comment on Spotify. Send it to your mom. But most importantly, just know we love you. And Evan, I love you.
Have a good night, everybody. Love you, Mike.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Football RPG Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at FFRPGPod and at FFMikeCash with a K. Don't let the goblins get you. We'll see you next week.